Uh, this is the second talk I'm giving on the basically five stages of growing up. Uh, that the majority of people, probably almost, uh, I don't know, a fraction of a percent of people on the planet have any idea of what these are, and that's a problem. And so we're going to talk today about. We talked last week about. The egocentric stage and the ethnocentric stage, and we're going to revisit those briefly. But then we're going to talk about the sort of modern rational stage, and then the postmodern stage, which we're sort of in now, and then a fifth stage, which is an integral stage. Uh, Proverbs in the Jewish scripture in Proverbs, they say, without a vision, the people perish. And part of postmodernism is we sort of lose the pattern, we lose the thread, we lose the vision, and it's sort of just one of the shadow parts of postmodernism. Like things don't, you know, uh, things aren't holding together. The center cannot hold, as Yeats wrote. Uh, and so the vision that gives me hope right now, in a relatively dark time right now, the vision that gives me hope right now is the evolution of consciousness. And I owe what I know about the evolution of consciousness to Ken Wilber. We're reading Ken he's sometimes called the Einstein of consciousness. Wilber's not for everybody. He offers challenges in the reading, but man, he's not called the Einstein of consciousness for no reason. He's plumbed it. And to be able to see the gift of being able to see these stages of growth, uh, in human beings is rare. Like I said, virtually nobody on the planet even sees these. They're invisible. Uh, and so that's what we're going to explore today. And we're going to keep that sort of in our side view mirror as we go on. But it gives me hope to understand evolution in a deeper way. Um, Evolution leaps ahead and then mysteriously sort of goes in reverse. It's not a straight line. Evolution, most people think evolution was over like 45,000 years ago or something, when we got the brain that we have, physical evolution. But we're talking about the evolution of consciousness that still has a ways to go. But this evolution, whether it's physical or consciousness, it makes leaps, and we need a leap right now. But then it will do a retrograde movement. It will reverse and go backwards for a while, and then it will leap again, and then go backwards again, and then leap again. That's just the way it is. It's sort of 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. But my hope is in the fact that it relentlessly goes forward. Like a little a river. It'll eventually find the ocean, where all the rivers meet and are one body of water. So I want to talk about these 5 stages of growing up, and I'm going to go back to the screensaver for those of you who came in late, and for those of you on YouTube later, just to give you a little visual. I'm blocking myself here for a minute. Let me see. Yeah. There we go. This is what some of you were looking at for a while, and in wonderment, I'm sure. Yeah. Now, I bought a set of jacks, ball and jacks, so I could do this setup. My wife, of course, thought I was losing my mind yet again. What are you buying ball and jacks? But jacks are very interesting. They're just like that last time we had that image of the 6-armed cross, where we know the normal cross goes like this, 4 arms, but then adding 2 arms. Uh, and then, that brings up both the vertical and the lateral. And it brings in both waking up and going up in a visual. So that's what the jacks are about. And um, last week we talked about the red jack and the yellow jack. We talked about uh, sort of the first stage of growing up, the red, and it's Wilbur assigns these colors to it uh, just to talk. It's like a shorthand, but that's sort of the egocentric, and we all went through that, and we talked about it last week. You know, the egocentric is from birth to probably about 11 months. And it probably takes 6 months before the ego even shows up. That's that period of where it's called, it's not non-dual, it's sometimes confused with that. We think there's some great place to go back to. Well, it was a dual kind of consciousness in the sense that as babies we didn't know that there was no separation between our body lying in the crib, or our body and our mother's body, or anybody who holds us. It takes till about 5 or 6 months to even show up. And then we have the sense of separate self, which, a lot of bad names are thrown at it, false self, got to slay the ego and all that. But it's really, ego just really means it's a sense of separateness. And all of a sudden there's mom over there. Here I am, etc. And that happens somewhere around 6 months. And then from 6 months to 11 months, or 11 months for sure, but more likely to somewhere 4 or 5 years of age, we survive on this eccentric, egocentric program. It's really our survival operating system in the beginning, and it's beautiful. And the main focus is, how can I navigate the body and its impulses? What are our impulses when we're little like that? Hunger, thirst, aggression, power, when we start to become two, me do it, terrible twos, because we discovered power and we discovered magic, we can cover our eyes and we think no one can see us. All right. So, there's like the first person. And so it's egocentric is all about me. Okay. And that should, when I remember going to first grade at Catholic school, Dominican school in my town, and all of a sudden there wasn't just me. There was 59 other people. We had 60 people in the first grade. Plus there was Sister Imelda, who was not like my mother or my grandmother. So then you're sort of vaulted into at age 5 or 6, or whenever you start school, you're vaulted into the ethnocentric realm, which is main focus there is how you can fit in and conform to a social group. Now, granted, a lot of people aren't up to it. They're not up to it in the first grade. They're not up to it in the 8th grade. Sometimes they're really not up to it, when they're 75. They're still locked into the, egocentric mode. And they're always trouble. I don't care where you are on the Enneagram. If you're locked into the egocentric mode, you're not happy, and the people around you are not happy. It's just the way it goes. It's meant to fade back. It's meant to fade back. So the ethno means your ethnic group in the beginning. And that's not about me, that's about us, which is bigger, which is an improvement. But there's always a them, isn't there? So then we fall into the us and them. There's us and the others. Okay. And the religious form goes from magic in the egocentric, shamans, wizards, magicians. First cave paintings were probably done in that kind of magic view of spirituality and life. By the time you get to ethnocentric, it's from 300,000 BC for the magic egocentric to about 8,000 BC, where we have the ethnocentric, which is more about mythic. Myths start to come out there about your social group. And shamans are replaced by priests and kings. And this is the amber or the yellow section. Uh, uh, Priests and kings come in there, and they connect you with the gods. And religion at that level is probably and ethnocentricity is probably the stage of 70% of the world's population still. And that we see the problems of that. Most armed conflicts, terrorism, and wars arise from this stage of us versus them, good versus evil. You know, it doesn't matter if you're a Baptist bombing an abortion clinic or an Islamic terrorist blowing themselves up and a bunch of people with them. Doesn't matter. It's still from this fundamentalist religious view. There's us and there's them, and we're stuck in it. We're moving out of it. We're trying to move out of it, and the sooner we move out of it, the better. To where we see us versus them. Now, the new one, the orange level, is that dawned on us about the 1700s, 18th century, and you can see how rapid this really is when you think of 300,000 years, then 8,000 BC, and now in the 1700s, the orange stage of growth starts to establish itself, which is about reason. This was called the Age of Reason. Science begins to replace religion in Europe, especially. And this is the birth of a kind of strategic operating system that starts to take over. Well, reason is brilliant. It's strategic. You can solve practical problems with it. This is also a time, in France for the Declaration of the Rights of Man. So coming with reason and in this world-centric thing, now it's bigger. See, now it's not just me. Now it's not just us. No, it's all of us. We're starting to see a much bigger vision. Science, there's, after a while, science, there's no, there's not French science. There's not Chinese science, there's not Muslim science or Christian science, there's just science. H2O is H2O. So this is a strategic operating system, very powerful, and it took over about 300 years ago. All humans have rights. That thought starts to come out. The abolition of slavery began. Unfortunately, there's shadows in all these sections. We threw spirit out with God during that time. Nietzsche, who's misunderstood, that German poet and philosopher. People. I remember seeing Time magazine cover of it one time. Maybe it was in the '60s, where it said, "God is dead," and it said Nietzsche, and then it said Nietzsche is dead. God. I didn't read the article, but they misunderstood. What was dead then was somehow in Europe anyway, dying and heading towards death was the belief in a kind of mythological, magical, in Europe, Christianity, where Jesus was a miracle worker, where, mythological religion believes Moses actually physically parted the Red Sea. With myths, there's 3 levels. You read Joseph Campbell, he's clear on this. If you take it at the literal level, which most fundamentalist religion works at, if you take it at the literal level, Joseph Campbell, the great myth guy, said, well, that's pernicious. He said there's 2 other levels, a symbolic level and then the transformational level. But, Charlton Heston went like this and the seas parted, and then you drove your ship, then it came back on the chariots and all that. That's a literal level, literal story, mythic story. My Zen master for 10 years was a Dutch Jesuit who was a Hebrew scholar. And he said, it's not that at all when you read the Hebrew. Moses had to walk into the Red Sea to where it came up to his nose before it parted. It's a very different story. And now you're getting into symbolism in terms of faith. There's that symbolic talking about what faith and trust really is. that put your staff up and it parts. Well, that's magic. But the second one was symbolic of faith. And then there's even a more transformational way to look at that story or myth. But that dies as reason and science comes in. Now, you go to Europe, in the churches, they're tourist sites, but there's very few people at mass. That So the spirit got thrown out with God. This is also, we became industrialized, and this is the birth of nation states at that time, empires are around at that time. And really, the thing about the world-centric orange stage is it was about freedom for all of us, because we lived under authoritarian monarchies or whatever form for a long time. And so freedom, and that was the start of the American Revolution, British Empire, revolting against against the French Revolution. And it continued all the way into the 1960s, where colonies in Africa said we don't want to be colonies anymore. So, but it started there just 300 years ago. That's what's called world-centric one, or modernity, started in the 1700s. And then the green level is called postmodernism, or world-centric two. Now it's not just all of us, but we've expanded this sense of all of us. We sort of got into a postmodern mindset after World War II. So much happened in World War II. We saw an authoritarian movement 100 years ago, roughly. Saw authoritarian movement build to where the whole war was fighting over it. The whole world was fighting over it. It was a world war. We thought we were through with that. And out of that, including dropping the atomic bomb, the United States dropping the atomic bomb on Japan, killing hundreds of thousands of Japanese just like that, in Hiroshima and then at Nagasaki. So that shook everybody up, and so a new version came out where international organizations became more important. UN, international human rights come forward. And then, of course, we're starting to go from post-industrial to an information economy, globalism. World-centric two is multiracial, multicultural. And freedom moves into social justice and ecology. If you're around in the 70s when Earth Day happened, it's spreading. This thing is expanding. All of us is now starting to include nature, you see. So those are the four what is called the first tier stages of consciousness. And what groups them together as a tier is, unfortunately, each of these stages. It could be any of them, from egocentric to world-centric too. Each of these stages thinks that its truth and values are the only important truth and values in existence. Get that? Because that is something that's unique and shadowy about it. No matter what stage you're at, and you can't help the stage you're at. I mean, you can't skip stages. This is human growth. But each stage thinks that its values and its truth is the only important truth and value in existence. All the others are childish, confused, stupid, dangerous, wrong, or the worst case, just plain evil. Okay. And so welcome to the culture war as we know now. Now we're talking about religion versus science in a big way. I'm just riffing off the last election. Religion versus science. You'll think about Think about where our culture was um, 4 years ago when we were in COVID, the battle over science, religious people, and all kinds of other people, thought, do you want to wear a mask? That was just basic science. So religion versus science, more us versus them. Uh, Woke versus what? I don't know. We're wanting to get rid of woke. Well, what would it be versus unconscious? So, all right, which side do you want to be on there? Woke versus unconscious, I guess. And then now we're dealing politically with autocracy versus democracy. That was one of the themes of the last election. So these are culture wars because we got people at certain stages and people at all these stages, and they're arguing with one another. Even in the liberal thing where world centric one, world centric two is pretty much liberal thinkers. There's arguments over between those two things in terms of in the Congress you can see different liberal people not agreeing, and everybody thinks their truth and their values are the only important truth and values in existence. And so you get one big argument. Those are culture wars. Now, the second tier of consciousness, at least in this picture, the integral, is represented by the eye in the center. And if you take a look at the iris in the eye, it's reflecting all the colors, which is what integral does. The integral level of consciousness is holistic. In other words, it sees them all, and inclusive. This is also a sacred operating system because the sacred comes back into this. It had been sort of lost in the two world-centric things, ways of seeing the world, the place of the sacred. So this opens us up to again to a sacred operating system, but it's holistic and inclusive. It can see all the others. Previous stages viewed from the integral stage are all deeply significant and they can't be skipped. This is just how human consciousness goes. You can't skip it like skipping a grade in school just because you're smart or something. No, this is human consciousness. So an integral view sees all of them are very significant. And this is the key for integral consciousness. It transcends, it goes further than them, but it includes anything that it includes the beauty, truth, and goodness of all the previous stages. If there's something beautiful, true, or good in the stage, it's going to carry that along. Not going to just throw it out like the baby with the bathwater, like God was in the spirit was thrown out, and they were just going all science, you see. So that beauty, truth, and goodness, which is a very old pattern, this was the whole ball of wax in a way for the ancient Greeks: beauty, truth, and goodness. And so if there's something beautiful, true, and good about all stages, and so it's going to transcend them, it's going to keep going towards more wholeness. Egocentricity is about me. Ethno is about us. Always has a them, of course, unfortunately. And then there's, reason. So, all of us for world-centric one, and then even expanded sense of all of us to include nature. Okay, in world-centric too, but this is going to transcend all of that. But the beautiful, anything of beauty and truth and goodness in those. See, from an integral point of view, nobody can be 100% right, and nobody can be 100% wrong. Everybody has anywhere from a lot of truth to a little truth, but there's a truth in even the egocentric perspective, especially when people bomb your houses and stuff, and you've got to survive, and so you go back to the survival operating system. You wouldn't want to not have it, or rivers come through and wipe out your town, and you don't. So we have these things. It's not about getting rid of it. It's about seeing where the truth is, where the beauty is, where the goodness, and carrying that along as you get a you know, the thing about integral is it's heading towards a greater wholeness. That's what it's transcending for. Um, and now in integral, as it's called integral, it integrates science and spirituality. That's the key. And you know, you if you poll millennials, 70% of them say, "I'm spiritual. I'm not religious," which can bug some people in institutional religion and does. But I think if you're really paying attention, that's just saying, "Yeah, we're hungry for something other than you know Walmart or Amazon and just buying stuff. We're hungry and." But they just don't feel they can find it there. None of my kids go to a Catholic church anymore. But spirituality. So to integrate science and spirituality and have that act as a conveyor belt that'll take us to a greater wholeness. I mean, the spirit is powerful. People cannot live without it. You just can't live in a materialistic flatland. Like that's part of, unfortunately, when you get rid of spirit entirely, there's just stuff left. And that's not enough for human beings. We want something greater. Now, also, the integral consciousness integrates the unconscious, these are Jung's term, integrates the unconscious anima and animus, the unconscious feminine energy, the anima, and the unconscious masculine energy, uh, animus. And you could have access to those, or those could be in the unconscious shadow area for you, whether you're a man or a woman. But it's to be integrated is you have full access to both those kind of archetypes that he called it, certain kinds of energy. It's often misunderstood in the uh, parable of Martha and Mary. You know, Martha's always doing everything, and Mary is just kneeling. You know, she just there with Jesus, listen to the teachings. You know, they always say active and contemplative, but I think it's also uh, we have both in us. We have this active kind of energy, which is connected more with the um, animus, and then we have this contemplative energy, this energy of just being, so doing and being. We have both energies in us to unite them both. That's why I say the last line of my poem, The Hokey Pokey, you make being your purpose and doing flows from it. That's a flip around from our culture, which is primarily about doing. After you tell somebody your name, then it won't take too long for them to say, well, what do you do? They don't ask you, what do you be? They don't ask you, what is your dream? Or what means the most to you? No, they ask you, what do you do? So we're trying to balance that off too. And that's key, an effort to balance that off. And this is the leading edge of evolutionary love. This is it, this kind of consciousness. So to point it out, which I'm doing, is a huge thing. That's the Tibetans are the masters of pointing out states and stages. And this wasn't really known until, the beginning of the 20th century. So it's a little more than 100 years old. And then most people in our culture know nothing about this. And so they can, you're at the stage you're at, but when you point out that there's something more than this and something that has a greater heft to it, then you have a shot of it's easier to go that way when, 100 years ago, you only knew the religion that was in the holler with you around here. See, there's something bigger. All right. So I think, if you really want to drill down on this, if you feel the need to, well, Wilber's latest book is great. It's called A Radical Wholeness. It's about how we're meant to contain more. I mean, if you're talking about, even in traditional terms, a human being becoming God, well, it takes a little bit more space than just your little ego, you see. Yeah. So that's what we've got going here. Now, so now we always do bit of a talk. This was quite a bit of a talk. But then we shift over to from and today from talking about growing up to actually directly experiencing the spirit in meditation. So that's the difference between growing up. Growing up employs a lot of cognitive, but then when you actually try to wake up in terms of just absolutely experience the spirit, um, the mind actually gets in the way. So we're making kind of radical shift here. Uh, so uh, I'm going to get rid of uh, this, and we're going to go to this, which totally different. Not totally different, but sort of different. This is the journey we're on now. Yeah. And when you put the two together, when you put growing up and waking up together, boom, there's a lot of movement. And that's what this community is really about, doing both of those things, growing up, waking up, and we'll go on and do cleaning up in a few next sessions, which means dealing with the shadow. Yeah, yeah. But okay, so this is our icon, and of the journey. And you notice the narrow road to get from the world of doing and thinking to the center of being. And we'll, as always, use our Tibetan friend Sogo Rinpoche to point things out. And if this gets in the way or anything, because you're in control when you can just turn your volume down. If you don't think this is helpful, just get rid of this sound. But I think it helps a lot of people. So let me